All right, so we were recording now. Awesome. Looks like we have some parents from our more of I guess the south part of the district in Adams, and then over here at Medlin. Wonderful. Glad y'all are joining us. All right, so let's get going here. When we look at motivation in children, it is obviously super important that our kids, for their own success, find what motivates them and that we encourage that as a parent. So I wanted to start off with this little quote here from an author that wrote a fabulous book I just recently read called The Self-Driven Child. And he says, and I'd love to know if you agree or disagree, and you can either just tell us or you can put it in the chat, but he said, children today are being denied a sense of controlling their own lives, doing what they find meaningful, and succeeding or failing on their own. So what do you think? Do you agree with that, or do you disagree, or are you unsure? But again, children today are being denied a sense of controlling their own lives, doing what they find meaningful, and succeeding or failing on their own. Ryan, as we give the parents a chance to, if they choose to put agree or disagree in the chat, what are your thoughts on that?
Well, we live in a different world, I think, nowadays than what we used to. Kids have different expectations, and I think parenting has changed from when some of us were younger. And one of the things that I tell kids a lot of times is just, especially the high school kids, is that it's a really difficult period of time for them because they're trying to gain their own independence. And it's a difficult time for parents because parents have gotten into a habit of, making sure that they're alive. For a mother, 9 months before their child's born, they've had to completely change their life. And then once a baby's born, if you're not watching the baby, they're gonna, bad things can happen. So by the time as kids get older, as parents, we try to make sure they're safe all the time. And sometimes that keeps them from being able to make their own decisions. And so it's really difficult for parents and for kids. And sometimes as parents, because we are trying to control their lives, we don't give them an opportunity to learn to control things. And because of that, it causes issues with the kids a lot of times.
Yeah, it's a fine balance for sure. Because when I listen to you, Ryan, I'm like, but oh my goodness, it's my job to keep them safe. Absolutely. But it's also my job to challenge them, to stretch them so they do grow and learn. But that balance is, it's sometimes hard to find.
Well, and part of the issue with that is, how are kids going to learn how to make decisions if we make all the decisions for them? Like at the age of 18, when they're considered an adult, we can't just throw them out into the wild and expect them to make all the right decisions if they haven't had any practice doing it.
Yeah. And so we can explore what that would look like depending on their age too. So, all right. So our goals today of our workshops is just to really understand, again, just revisit the concept of motivation. So make sure we're on our same page there. And then what are the symptoms of a lack of motivated child? What does that look like? And then encouraging some parenting skills that would then cause our children to hopefully have more motivation in life. So those are our goals. And so I threw in kind of a lot of research because I think it's important to kind of know where we're at. But just like Ryan said, there really is, if we look at some statistics about children, there is this lack of motivation, just kind of underachievers. And they say 15%, that's a pretty big difference there. But I think from back, maybe even when we grew up, it's the situation's gotten, I would say, worse. What we do know is that the motivation factor tends to really surface closer to puberty, which I find fascinating as a child development person. It just makes my head go like, why are all those reasons there? Probably such an uncertain time anyway that they might be lacking some motivation. But we do know this is a concern, and we appreciate the parents that jumped on tonight to kind of look at this, because we know that this causes a lot of stress in families for sure. Particularly as we get older and we're expecting more, but then for some reason they don't seem to want to do more as a person. It makes us worry. What about you, Ryan?
Yeah. I mean, the teenagers are, what ends up happening a lot of times is as parents, we have an idea of what they should be motivated by and motivated for, but as kids, they're motivated by something completely different. They're motivated by friends, they're motivated by video games. I mean, there's 1,000 different things, but they don't seem to a lot of times they don't have the same goals, and so when you don't have the same goals, you're not going to get the same outcomes.
Yeah, those are definitely good points. So it kind of depends on what lens you have on, the kid's lens versus our lens. Like, why isn't my child motivated to clean her room? I think she should be. But apparently she does not.
Well, she doesn't see it as a big deal.
No, not at all. So this is kind of a lot here, but let me just paraphrase. I love brain science. I'm fascinated by it. And so what they're looking at is that having experiencing a healthy sense of control happens in our prefrontal cortex. So it's called the executive functioning part of the brain. And this is regulated by the amygdala. And so when the prefrontal cortex is in charge, it says it feels like people are in a good place. They called it in our right minds, that we feel control. We're not so anxious. So this is from that Self-Driven Child book. What we are seeing, and you've seen too, and why probably you even got hired, Ryan, is that more kids are anxious. And so we're seeing that maybe their amygdalas are overactive, making them feel very overwhelmed and maybe just kind of helpless. So what we see as a lack of motivation is really overwhelmed and kind of like I give up, kind of hands up, like they're not even sure where to go.
And that overwhelmed feeling leads to a lack of control.
Absolutely. And so I love that this next part though, where it says that motivation is strongly connected to autonomy. And you mentioned that as far as our kids doing things on their own. So that's going to be a theme throughout this for sure in our short time tonight together, is that we want to see every opportunity as parents that we can give our kids autonomy, that they're making the choices when appropriate, obviously, definitely age appropriate, depending on the circumstances, but as many choices as possible. And we think that might be giving up our control as a parent, but actually we'll still remain the lead and the head control. So just because we give them choices doesn't mean we're handing the power over to them.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Do you have any insight on that?
No, not necessarily.
Okay, well then let's define motivation to make sure we're on the same page. So, I love this it's a feeling, right? It's a feeling that we get to get things done. It may be even a feeling of excitement to get something accomplished. So it helps us work against discouragement. It helps us face competition and challenge. It also it helps us take on that task with determination and perseverance. So motivation can be stimulated by outside forces, but as it matures, when our kids mature, the inside forces produce so much more of that stimulus. So we're going to definitely camp on that at some point of that factor of motivation. But that's what we're saying. We just want our kids to feel that sense of, hey, I need to get this done, whether it's homework or getting their first job or just making their bed or whatever. But having that I can do attitude, but even excited about it, and feeling the sense of accomplishment. And all of this is all wrapped up in this whole motivation talk. So as we go, parents, please feel free again to unmute yourself. Ryan and I are just having this conversation here, but know that we'd love for you to pop in anytime. You can also, put in the chat, but you can very much unmute yourself at any point.
Well, and one of the things I wanted to add about motivation was talking about, and what Cynthia, talking about there is the difference between intrinsic motivation and extrinsic motivation. So where you see kids who are the most successful, the ones who are motivated, are the ones that are intrinsically motivated. They're motivated on their own. Where I think traditionally parents have done, and I know that I'm super guilty of it, is doing the extrinsic motivation. So that's, either giving them, something, saying, hey, if you, with elementary school kids, it's okay, you get so many check marks throughout the day or throughout the week, you get a prize from the treasure box. Those things, those are extrinsic motivation. And research shows that doesn't work. It actually demotivates a person over time, because they're not the ones, that find enjoyment in whatever it is that they're doing. It's kind of what parents do is use the stick and carrot approach. You put that stick out there with the carrot and you hope that your kid runs after the stick, and you just keep it out in front of them. Eventually, the kids will figure out that, hey, I can't get that carrot as any time that I want. I'm relying on someone else. So
that's a good point. And I think that, reality is, really life will have both. So I know I leave a lot of days from work feeling great about some of the things, I get to do with students, but then I also enjoy my paycheck. So we have some intrinsic and extrinsic definitely working together in life. But that intrinsic is going to be a powerful motivator for our kids. The older they get and the less we're able to provide those carrots, for sure. So let's look at just the characteristics of a child who's probably not very motivated for one reason or another. And so I am not a big fan of just totally reading these to y'all. So if you would take a sec to look at them, and just do a check-in with what, maybe thinking about your child or children. What sticks out to you as you're like, yeah, that's happening in my child's life, or that is very much one of their characteristics. So Ryan, as parents are looking at that list, what are a couple of the things on here that you see probably pretty big time, in just working with teens even?
Well, the forgetfulness all the time. I mean, that's especially this time of the year, when we're really trying to motivate kids to pass their classes so they get credit and things like that. I mean, that you can tell them till you're blue in the face that the first excuse that we always hear is, oh, I forgot about it, or blaming their parents for something, or blaming the teacher for not giving them credit, or just whatever. They come up with any excuse to justify why they didn't do what they should have done. And really what it comes down to is they were not motivated to complete whatever task was in front of them.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And so, I mean, a lot of the stuff on here is when we think about some of the things causing the anxiety in our kids' lives and all that, it's no wonder they're giving up easily. Mm-hmm. And then, just not having that tenacity or that endurance or grit to continue on something that's hard. That fear of failure, just.
Well, and a lot of times I can say for myself, when I have something that I need to do that I don't feel comfortable in, or I don't feel like I know what I'm doing, it causes me to procrastinate. It causes me to, it causes me to come up with excuses on why I don't get it done or whatnot. And, it's the same as kids. The kids go through the same things that we do as adults. And so, kids are lucky because normally they have other people in their lives, like their parents, that can help them with the tasks that they don't really know how to do. They have teachers, they have parents, other friends. They have lots of people in their lives and that a lot of times can help in those situations. But
Hmm.
there's so many reasons and so many different things that cause that lack of motivation.
Absolutely. And I actually like looking at lists like that, like this, because then it just, makes me remember that we can normalize that these feelings, are part of life. I'm scared to not do things well too, but it's okay to feel that way, but it shouldn't stop me from trying hard things.
Mhm.
And so I think the kiddos need to, as they grow and mature and we have those conversations with them, we can let them know, well, we need to get past these things. Yeah, it's normal feelings, but we're not going to let them stop us. There's one more list here as we look at what the typical things happen with a kiddo who might not feel motivated. Um, so yeah, just as again, going back to that, not getting things done, so things can be done halfway. Um, Lots of times I'll hear students say, well, I didn't turn it in because I didn't finish it. And when I was in the classroom, I would say, gosh, I'd rather you turn in something halfway done than, being scared just because you didn't finish it. That's
Mhm.
50 is better than a 0. But as we go down the list, some of this is stronger things, even up to where we're acting out. Um, so what is something you've seen with students in
Well,
it?
I can tell you that I have over the years I've seen so many students who act out and are disruptive in class or get in trouble at school. And it doesn't matter if they're in high school, middle school, elementary school, but a lot of times they do that because it's less embarrassing to be the troubled kid, the troublemaker, than it is to be the kid who is not smart and doesn't understand the assignment and doesn't do well at school. So it's easier for
Mhm.
them to fail than it is, or it's easier for them to not try and fail than to try and fail.
Mhm.
So you see those behaviors so often.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, you just really kind of hit some of this because it's generally, if we had to narrow it down to one thing, if I'm thinking, why is my child not showing much motivation? It's because they're discouraged in one way or another,
Mhm.
and they've gotten stuck. So our job would be to figure out how to get them unstuck and how to build their confidence through their competence. So whatever that is, if it's a subject or if it's they're not doing well as well on the soccer team as they thought, well, what can we do to get the practice in, or maybe we need rest or whatever it is, how can we get them unstuck so they're not discouraged and then they can move forward in their goals. So as we definitely thought it was important to look at, reminding ourselves what this lack of motivation looks like. Um, but I think there's some things that we need to own up to, just like we want our kids to own up to their things. Sometimes it's us. Sometimes we're discouraging, and so we're well-meaning for sure, but it could be discouraging to our kiddos depending on how we're addressing them. Sometimes in that enmeshment, we're too on top of our kids, both emotionally and maybe some controlling there. Um, in looking at this list, Ryan, what else do you see the kids tell you of why they might be discouraged?
Well, a lot of times they don't have confidence in themselves, and that could be whether it's from parents who they feel like they can't, you know, like they can't satisfy them no matter what they do. They feel like they're not enough. So whether I've seen several times where it is really well-meaning parents who are trying to push their kid and hold them accountable, whether the parent is doing the right thing or the wrong thing, the kid sees it very much so as the wrong thing. And while it could be the right thing for, you know, 90% of the kids in the world, it's not the right thing for their kid for whatever reason. And so it just, they don't feel like they have the confidence. They feel like, well, I've always failed at this. I can't, I'm not going to be successful this time. They just don't have the confidence in themselves.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that is huge. And then um some of this stuff is totally out of our control. Like there sometimes our lack of sleep is, I'm not staying up babysitting my teenagers. They need, I say, get some sleep, but they're on their own. But so many teenagers and so many kids in general, for one reason or another, might be lacking sleep. And
That is a big thing that I hear from almost every day. I hear a kid say, "Yeah, I went to bed at 4 a.m. I went to bed at 2. I didn't sleep last night." And I mean, they're not going to be successful at anything that they do if they don't get enough sleep.
Mhm,
And
mhm.
and school starts early,
Yeah, it
and so if
does.
they're going to bed at 4 and waking up at 7:30, that's
Yeah.
tough.
Yeah, definitely not enough for sure. So, yeah, these are just things in my opinion to explore and just know all of us parents, and I promise you, we're right in there with you, have experienced or have some of the habits of on this list. But it's just a time to check in and kind of look and see what maybe something we can work on ourselves. So I love though the thought of, just the Chinese proverb, the longest journey starts with a single step. I mean, it really, that's what I love to try to encourage families, and even in my own life, just what's one thing? What is one thing that I can do? So as we look at this, guys, we're going to look at things we can do in as parents, and then specifically with our kiddos. So as caregivers, it's great if we demonstrate any of and all of these things on this list. Some of it comes easy to us, some of it not so much. So I think it's important for our kids, for us to be honest with them and say, hey, like organizational skills, I'll just fess up right now, probably not my strongest suit.
Not
And
mine either.
yeah, okay. So, but I do work on it. And so I can tell them why it's important to be organized, but I'm probably going to always struggle with that in life. And that's okay as long as I'm functional, right? We just want to let them know we're not, perfect is off the table, but we want to work towards these skills because they're important parts of having success in life. I have to make goals, I have to be able to set them. I need to be able to break it down and know how to reach them. It helps so much if I have a growth mindset instead of I get to a point, if I think I know it all, I don't know how I could ever know it all. So helping our kids see this, and of course, modeling to them perseverance. So Ryan, if you had to choose kind of one of these, I mean, they're all important, but is there anything specifically you hear
Well,
say, I wish, blah, blah, blah?
one of the things that I notice a lot from the older kids is that they haven't learned how to set goals. And so one of my things that I like to say to them is simply, if you don't have a goal, you're just kind of like a plastic bag blowing in the wind. I think Katy Perry stole that from me and put it in one of her songs. Yeah, you have no direction. If you have no direction, you're not going to really ever end up anywhere. And so I try to work with them on setting short-term goals and long-term goals, so that because if you have a goal in mind of what you want to be, where you want to be, you just naturally start to make those decisions, and then you become intrinsically motivated to do those things. Like, if
Mhm.
you want to be a veterinarian, you know that you have to get into college. If you want to get in college, then you have to do well in high school. If you have to do well in high school, then you have to learn your algebra. You have to do good on your algebra test. If you want to do good on your algebra test, you have to study. It all sets it up. It makes it easy for them to just kind of know what to do, as opposed to having no goal. Your algebra test isn't that important, because what's it really going to do for you? Uh,
Mhm.
and then I know with my own kids, I have some younger kids, um, and so what I try to do with them is explain. I try to stay away from the punishments, and any punishment that they get is a real short term one. But then after every punishment, I do give them a talk, and I explain why. I try to make a connection that they understand, and I fail at making a good connection more often than I'm successful. But when I make a connection of, hey, don't hit your brother, not I don't tell them don't hit your brother because your brother doesn't like it. It's more of a, Well, if you hit your brother, he's going to model your behavior, and then he's going to hit you. So if you don't want your brother to hit you, you can't hit him. It's just being able to make those little connections so that
Mhm.
they are more motivated. They see the benefit in their decisions and their behavior, as opposed to just being told no, you're wrong, and being yelled at. That just
Sure.
doesn't work long term.
Yeah. Yeah. Um, Thanks for that insight. And I would say easier said than done for sure. But all we can
Oh
do,
yeah.
just like our kids. I mean, we're on a growth journey as parents. And so if I knew now what I did, or knew then what I do now, I might have made some different choices. But you know what? Overall, it's going to be okay. Our kids know we love them, and we're just here to grow with them too.
Mm.
So if you're on an iPhone, gosh, this might be a little hard to see, and I apologize. But let's look at just a few steps or a few things that help really build motivation for children. And so when we look at these, I'd love for you again to that small step. What's one of those things that you'll challenge yourself to work on? With your child? And then also, what are some things you can affirm yourself on? Like if you know you're doing some of these really well, y'all, parenting's hard. I say let's celebrate. I mean, I love looking at lists and going, oh my gosh, I do that. And the people tell me this is good. I'm like, woo, I think that's super important that we encourage ourselves and give ourselves a pep talk. So in looking at just the first few here, what goes back to those choices. So number one is just like letting the child make as many developmentally appropriate and safe choices as possible. So, think about that for a second. And, is that something you struggle with? Is that something you're like, yeah, I do that pretty well. But that's super important. They've got to feel a sense of control over their life. So if you have a 3-year-old, let them choose what to wear to preschool. It just doesn't really matter. It's except for maybe picture day. But really, it's okay if their shirt doesn't match their pants or whatnot. Or if it does, like you can say you can have this one or this one and give choices, but still overall giving them the ultimate decision on
Yeah,
that.
and the younger they are, or even the old kids, giving them choices, but letting them decide between the safe choices that you give them. That builds autonomy just as well as, actually probably better than just saying, hey, choose whatever you want. But
Mhm.
you know, if you say,
Yeah.
hey, the red one's good today, the green one's good today, pick your favorite. That
Mhm.
is just as good, and you're happy with both the choices, and they'll be happy and feel independent in whatever they choose.
Yep. Yeah, I love that they still do want some structure and guidance, but ultimately not to feel controlled by us. But yeah, so and then of just really setting these reasonable goals and expectation with the child. And so that they have a say in whether they maybe do soccer versus baseball or whatever that you're looking at for the day, whatever the topic is, but really including them in and just having those conversations and making that whether you need to just put those on their bathroom mirror with some expo markers of just a couple of the goals that they're working on. I think those reminders are helpful, but doing that with them and talking about goals, like you said. Making a home a safe base where they can feel like, I'll tell you, we're just like parents, where we're go, go, go all day and we come home and we're just like, we just need to have a home where we feel we're able to rest and recover and, and not be like not held accountable for sure. That's not where this conversation's going, but we definitely need to be able to recover from our busy weeks and without did you do this? Did you do this? Did you do this? That there's a time and place for that for sure, but we also need to give them the ability to rest at home.
Well, and part of that is being wait. I always get these two confused. Authoritative and authoritarian parent. They sound very similar, but they're very different. Authoritarian parent tells the kid exactly what to do, when to do it. If they don't do it, they're punished. There's a lot of parents like that, and those kids rebel and resist and are not always the most highly functioned kids. But an authoritative parent is one that sets firm boundaries, and has expectations, but also allows the kid's voice to be heard. And, like anybody, I think like most adults, like if you're in a work environment and you don't feel like you can talk to your boss or the people in charge, you don't feel as valued, and you're not as you don't feel as part of the organization. And the same thing goes for our kids. Like if their voices aren't heard, they're not all in on the family. They're not all in on the expectations. But if you just give them a little voice and allow that to grow, then they are going to be more intrinsically motivated to be successful at whatever is important to you, because those types of relationships are what build motivation a lot of times. Whether and a lot of research shows that kids who have a strong relationship with their teachers are going to do much better in that teacher's class.
Mhm.
If they don't like their teacher and they don't feel like their teacher is fair or their teacher is mean, a lot of times that teacher is going to have worse outcomes. And the same thing goes for at home. And so we have to be real careful with that, and provide that good environment for our kids.
That's excellent, Ryan, for sure. I think that's something we need to explore more next fall when we get back up to more of our webinars. I love that. All right. And so we kind of mentioned already being encouraging and putting the efforts for number 4 there on the process of their work and seeing them, persevere through something and not just the end result. That kind of even ties in with goals of breaking them down and working, consistently towards a goal. And so, is there a way that you see, Ryan, that it's, do you have any special phrases you use with kids instead of, oh, you got the A, good job, versus something more
Yeah.
specific?
Yeah. Again, for my kids, I really try to use the word proud a lot. Hey, you. Okay, I'll give a perfect example. This weekend, one of my kids is kind of sassy with his mom, and I'm really working hard on trying to get him to not be. And so we stopped at a gas station, and he didn't get any snacks, but his mom got a snack, his brother got a snack, and we drive away, and he, you know, decided 5 minutes later, hey, I'm hungry. Is there any snack for me? And his mother said, yeah, you can have some of my snack, or I don't think your brother's going to eat the rest of his. You can have some of your brother's. And he thought about it. He really wanted his mom's snack, but he decided to take his brother's because he didn't want to take it from his mom because he knew that it was important to her. So he made that decision. And I asked him, I said, why did you make that decision? He goes, well, because I know my mom really wanted that. So it's like, wow, I'm really proud of you for putting your mom first and doing the things we've been working on. And it was really big for him just by using the word proud and giving him, acknowledging when he did something the right way. Like it was a big deal.
Yeah, and actually, Brian, and I appreciate that you take that time with them to break it down like that. Again, parenting is a lot of work, and so it's easier sometimes not to say anything. So, yay, for you taking the time to do that, which goes into number 5 of like, then even turning it on him of going, I feel proud, but boy, I bet you're proud of yourself knowing you made her day or whatever that would be. So that's big. Whatever we can do to encourage our kids to build the grit in their life for number 6 of I can do hard things. And this can start just as young as possible. So that we encourage them that it's worth the hard work to get someplace in life and in, little things. And so building that for them. Number 7 of just keeping yourself separate from your child. I think this is really hard because we put so much of ourselves into our parenting that we sometimes feel like if they're failing, then we must be failing. And growing up is hard. And so I need to remind myself that just because my child's making this mistake, you know what? I mean, we all did make mistakes. And so
Mhm.
I can't sit there and be so hard on myself or think that their accomplishments are totally my accomplishments and you know, vice versa. Their failures are my failures. We got to be able to separate that and keep in mind that, you know, of everybody's path of growth for them as a child and the mistakes they'll make and for us as a child, and that it doesn't have to be, you know, one and the same.
Well, and failure is a part of life. There's no one who's ever walked this planet who hasn't failed at something, and it's changing your perspective on what failure means. Because failure doesn't mean you're not good enough. Failure is an opportunity to learn something. And, you know, I know some of the most successful people in this world have failed time after time after time, and they use what they learned in each of those instances to become successful. And so, especially with
Mhm.
kids who, the thing with kids is almost everything they do, they're doing it for the first time. And so, you know, you have to be there to help build their confidence and be okay with not being the best at whatever it is they're doing, whether it's, you know, mowing the yard or shooting a basketball or whatever. Like, it's okay not to be good. It
Mhm.
takes practice is what helps a person be successful, and you know, failure is part of practice.
Oh, that's so huge for sure. So I think that that should always be at the back of our mind for, you know, because then we lead, that would lead, if I didn't do that, that would lead to the too high of expectations and my child feeling overwhelmed. Kids want to please their parents. And so, you know, I promise, even when they get older and it doesn't seem like they want to please us, I mean, they really do find much joy in making us happy and that we're proud of them and all of that. And so, you know, we need to use that part of it to our advantage, but in the same breath, allowing them to know that failure is part of the growth journey and we learn and we move on from that for sure. So just to wrap it up, because I promised 45 minutes, we definitely number 8, 9, and 10, just, you know, rescuing our kiddos, saying like trying to allow them to assume as much responsibility of the consequences of their actions as possible is going to teach them so much. And that actually half the time's that punishment, right, Ryan? You mentioned,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
yeah, if we just allow them to feel those consequences, to take ownership of whatever it is that had happened, of their
Well,
part in it.
and you know, the best thing about natural consequences is that they don't come from you as the parent. And
Mhm.
so natural consequences with kids, it's the best because they're not, it gives them nothing to be frustrated with you about. And it gives you an opportunity to support them through the natural consequences. I know in the counseling office, I mean, we have parents call us all the time who are trying to, you know, get their kid out of whatever trouble their kid got in. And it's like, no, we can't do that. That's not what's best for the child. And so natural consequences are great.
Yep. Learn a lot from them for sure. And I love going back to what motivates kids. They're gonna like they're gonna find what excites them, and depending on the age, it could be a sport, it could be a topic, like they just are fascinated with dinosaurs when they're, you know, all whatever it is that fascinates them. That's a huge thing to cue in on, and then let them take the lead in all of that, and then support that fascination. And then as they see um, that for one reason or another those things pay off for them as they become their own little experts in things, that just builds on the skill of having that self motivation. Does that make sense? I feel like I'm not making sense.
No, no, it makes sense.
Okay. And of course you can't get away from just the plain truth of a good work ethic. and helping our kids know that it's important to be a hard worker. That unless you're born into the top 1% of the world's financial wealth or whatever, I mean, most of us are going to have to work for what we want and take, a lot of pride in what ends up, again, that success that comes from hard work. So to wrap things up, I wanted to finish with motivation. Again, I've just encouraged our kids, what would it look like for you as a parent to build this? Maybe your child's even at an age to have this discussion with them about motivation and breaking down what that means and how maybe you have concerns of not seeing it, or how can we build that in a child. But you can go over just even the definition of motivation. How can I encourage you to do blah, blah, whatever it is you're working on. Brian, do you feel like kids in general have a sense of understanding, and probably his age depends on the age, of what it means to have motivation?
No, I really don't think they have a great understanding of it as a whole. I mean, you have your kids who really do and who are really motivated, but I think you have just as many, if not more, who are more like that plastic bag I was talking about. But yeah, I think a lot of that is the difference between the parents who really work to teach the kids those things. And I think there's a lot of parents who have issues with motivation on their own. And so it's hard to teach something that you never really learned yourself.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
I'd say like the parents who are on this, like, I would think that for the most part, your kids probably have a lot of motivation, or at least know what motivation is, just trying to find it. But that's where so much of it, of good modeling, comes into play.
Yeah, for sure. I also want to just throw out at the end here that parents, I acknowledge that sometimes, motivation, highly motivated kids just might have been more born that way. A child's temperament very much could go into what their motivation looks like. So some of the kids are going to just have an easier time jumping on this train called motivation, and others, we're going to have to push them a little more. The other thing I want to recognize is that, there could be trauma. There could have been things in their life that are causing some emotional situations that maybe they need the next level of help on. So we want to recognize that could be it. And I just definitely don't want ever to go through one of these workshops and have a parent beat themselves up. We are doing the best we can. And I, just appreciate that you were out here today to explore these things, to just get one step closer in helping our kids develop and, in these areas. So those are some final thoughts. Again, some of the information I took from The Self-Driven Child. It is also on Audible. I'm a big Audible person. You can get it for free at your library too. And then The Whole Brain Child is another fascinating book that helps us really understand kids and how their brains work and all. So thank you so much, parents. If you would be so kind as to just know that as I plan next year's webinars, we would sure love your input. And so if you just go to nisdtx.org/PE for parent education, not for physical education. I realize how that's probably not the best thing there, but for parent education, and you can get my contact information there. And we'd love to hear your thoughts and see if you had any particular things you'd want to explore with us. So Brian, any last minute thoughts?
No, it just, talking about what you just said made me think of an old, one of my favorite saying about parents in this journey that we're on. And that's, wisdom is wasted on the old. And that's because we're all on a journey. By the time we become perfect parents, our kids are 30 and we're not parenting anymore. So we really appreciate all the hard work that you're doing, and know that, no one here is an expert, and that we are all just trying to learn and be the best that we can. And You know, I think more than anything, just as long as your kid knows that you love them and you care about them, they're going to be okay at the end of the day. We're all on a different journey. Some kids have more motivation than others, but that doesn't mean that they're either one is better. So just
Sure.
we'll all get to where we need to be.
Absolutely. Parents, thanks so much. Does anyone want to take a moment to have a question or, propose a question to us or have a comment? Because you're the expert of your child and you've learned a lot in this journey of parenting. We'd love to hear. So if anyone wants to, I'll pause a second. Anybody have a comment or question? Okay. We must have been very thorough. Thank you so much.